Hang on one second, everybody. Some reason I'm not getting gallery view. There we go. All right. I'm going to let Doug get everybody in. Welcome. I have gone all Lucid House Publishing with my sparkly night Lucid House Dreamer pajamas and my wonderful Christmas wreath crown. So welcome to tonight's event. Tonight, besides Echo Garrett and her co-publisher Connor Garrett of Lucid House Publishing, we are going to be welcoming both Judson Garrett and Kevin N. Garrett of Spellbound Under the Spanish Moss, a Southern Tale of Magic, Marilyn, Kriete, Paradise Road, a memoir, G. Claire, Dreaming in a Time of Dragons, Andrea, Faye, Christian, Suspension, a novel. Joseph Marshall III, I'm going to let, he's got a book, The Cowboy and the Indian, a novel. I'm going to let Echo explain where he is tonight. Tamra MdAnally, Bolton, The Art of Story Keeping, Saving History, One Family at a Time. We've got Mickey Goodman, who wrote the book with Vince Spinnato, and they will be our crescendo grand finale authors tonight for My Pursuit of Beauty. A cosmetic chemist reveals the glitz, the glam, and the batshit crazy. And our Douglas Thompson, who's been working behind the scenes with our tech work, he is the author of Knock Knock, along with Echo Garrett, of Lessons Learned and Stories Shared, a ride along with the sales superstar, Douglas Thompson. Welcome everybody to the Lucid House Publishing. And for those of you who don't know, I am just going to be in the background, but I am the Director of Acquisitions for these books, and we are thrilled to announce them. You heard earlier Gregory Eric Phillips, who has the wonderful book that was on the Sherry Staunch Main Street Reads panel, and a lot more. So here we go. Echo, Connor, take it away.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And first of all, I just want to say I was so inspired by our last couple of speakers. And when Jenna Blum was talking, I really related to her because she talked about growing up, getting to be in the newsroom with her dad. And I just thought, okay, that's where my desire to be a writer came from, because my father was a songwriter. And so I grew up getting to be in studios around all these incredible songwriters in Nashville. And I worked for my dad's publishing company, which became one of the most successful music publishers in Nashville. So that's where I learned that you can make a living with words. And that's where my passion came from. And so I've always loved writing. And I'm so excited tonight to introduce you to some great, talented people. I want to start with Marilyn, Kriete. She has written one of the most beautiful novels I've ever read in my life. I would put it in memoirs. Memoir is one of the genres that I love the most. As a kid, I loved any biography I could get my hands on. I loved reading other people's stories. Her book is absolutely stunning. And I would ask you, Marilyn, if you would tell us just a little bit about the backstory about why you wrote this memoir.
Sure. This was a story I always knew I was going to write someday. It just took me many, many decades to finally have the space and time and perspective in my life to write it. It starts basically with my childhood. I had kind of a very difficult relationship with my mother, which led me to running away at 14 and ended up in juvenile detention, and then ended up in a girls' home, ended up being on my own, not finishing high school and being on my own at 16. And then the heart of the story is actually finally finding kind of the person that loved me as profoundly and deeply as I was searching for, a man named Jack that I felt deeply in love with in my late teens. And he and I had an amazing relationship. We were friends for a long time before we got together as a couple. We set off on this bicycle trip to South America together, had dreams of going down there. And unfortunately, he died before that trip was over. And that spurred me onto my own quest to look for answers. And so I jumped on my bicycle and started riding all over the USA, heading one direction and then off another, and falling in other relationships, whatever, until I finally kind of stumbled into the answers didn't even realize I was searching for. So that was my story. And I knew it was an important story to tell. I knew it was an unusual story. And when I finally sat down to write it, it was just a joy to see it all on the page and to see how all the parts played together and how God had orchestrated this entire journey for me. Through basically the story is told through a lot of different relationships in my life, but that's basically where the story comes from. So it's kind of what formed me and shaped me and set me up for the rest of my life. So.
And tell me about where the story starts in terms of where you lived.
Okay, so I'm a Canadian. I'm one of the couple Canadians on this weekend. I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, which is pretty far north on the globe, and that's where I ran away from home. And then I ended up running away 850 miles west to Vancouver. So some of the story takes place there, and then a lot of the journey, of course, is my bicycle journeys with Jack, and then also on my own. A lot of that is kind of all throughout the USA. So kind of. Yeah, lots of locations.
A lot of travel.
Mm-hmm.
The level of detail, your memory for detail, you put people in the room with you. Do you feel like, your descriptions are just beautiful. I was wondering, could you read a little bit from your book?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So this is from chapter 7. So this is right after, so my best friend and I ran away together, and we were on the streets of Vancouver for a while before we got picked up by the police. Quite kind of funny story with that. Ended up being thrown in juvie for almost 2 weeks, and then flown back. My first time on an airplane, we were escorted. Each of us had a cop escorting us on the plane. And when we got off on the other end, we were taken directly from the airport to a girls' home, a home for wayward girls called the Maple Ridge. And this is basically picking up, arriving at Maple Ridge. So, Sister Mary Magdalene greets us at Cottage 4, cradling a black chihuahua atop her ample bosom. The dog resembles a squirmy rodent, wriggling and nibbling at her face as she coos back at him. This is my first peek into the actual world of Catholics. But Sister is nothing like the nuns in The Sound of Music. She wears a burgundy polyester dress hemmed precisely at mid-knee, the shortest she can get away with post-Vatican II. And her token veil barely covers the long silvery hair she's pulled into a ponytail. A narrow face and hawkish nose peg her at her age around 40, but she carries herself like a young girl, self-consciously. The moment she introduces herself, I wonder what sordid personal history moved her to become a nun and name herself after the notorious Mary of Magdala. And this is Chico, she warbles, my lovely, perfect, splendid little man. She leans forward to give us a closer view of the rodent, but Chico only snarls at us. I instantly hate him. Chico, Chico, be nice now. Sister seems to forget us for a moment as their love fest continues, replete with tongues and lips and canine belly gyrations. We wait for her to come back. Chico, lovely Chico, my little man, let's show these girls our new home. Laura and I have just come from the main building at the Maple Ridge Home for Girls, where we briefly met the Mother Superior and Mr. Ramsey, the anxious social worker in charge of the 50 or so wayward souls. Unbeknownst to us, we've been fast-tracked past the assessment unit, the locked basement quarters beneath Mr. Ramsey's office, where girls are held for observation until deemed fit to live in one of the 4 cottages or be held in long-term incarceration. We're amazed they haven't split us up yet, and they've taken us to the same cottage, and now Sister is walking us upstairs in the roomy house to the same bedroom. It's a huge room with enormous closets and matching twin beds and dressers at both ends of the room. Not only do Laura and I get to share a room, we get privacy too. I wonder if someone's made a terrible mistake and if this wondrous gift will be snatched away before we get to enjoy it. And there's more. As we examine the empty double closets, Sister explains how we'll fill them. I'm taking you shopping soon, she says, to get some new clothes. You'll each get to spend $150 at Zeller's for a new wardrobe. But we'll be going separately so you can take your time and I can help you with everything you need. I hope 150 is enough. You don't seem to have anything with you. Oh, and you'll get more money to spend on school supplies and toiletries. You know, makeup and jewelry, whatever you need. I almost pinched myself. $150 for new clothing is a fortune, probably close to what my parents have spent in my entire life on all the clothes I hated wearing. The only time I've gone shopping carte blanche was a few summers back when my suitcase went missing after camp and my mother grudgingly took me to replace my entire summer wardrobe. We fought the whole time, but eventually she let me spend $35 on a lime green mix and match ensemble, shorts, pants, jacket, and 2 stripy t-shirts. $150 is stupendous. And no one's ever given me money to spend on makeup or earrings. Sister nuzzles Chico while I stare back at her, gobsmacked. Now we'll show you the other girls' rooms and where Chico and I stay in our own little suite. It's private, but we're all on the same floor. Right, Chico, my little man? Let's show the girls our house. Nuzzle, nuzzle, nuzzle. We follow her down the hall and peek into 4 other large bedrooms, each furnished like ours and spotlessly clean. Sister's suite occupies half the upper floor, but she gives us only a quick peek into the plushy carpeted foyer of her hideaway. The girls will all be home from school soon. There are 6 of them besides you 2. Come on, Chico, let's show them the rest. I admire Sister's posture as she leads us downstairs. She has shapely legs, and I'll learn later how proud she is of her gams and the slim figure she diets to maintain. She reminds me of the original Mary Poppins, as vain as she is plain. As the days progress, we'll get to admire the dozens of nearly identical tunic-style polyester dresses she's sewn to showcase her best angles. The main floor has a tiny television room without a TV. We might put one back later, but we don't want you girls watching too much TV. And a primly decorated living room, which does have a TV, but the whole room is out of bounds unless it's your turn to vacuum. We vacuum the house every day, don't we, Chico? Or unless Sister invites you to watch her favorite programs on Friday nights. She tells us what they are, and we get a window into the romantic fantasies of a middle-aged nun. The FBI show Friday Nights with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. I love, love, love him. He's so incredibly handsome and so smart, I never miss a show. Oh, we love Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., don't we, Chico? And I love, love, love Johnny Cash. His voice is so deep and he's so handsome too, isn't he, Chico? We never miss watching Johnny Cash. And there's Tiny Tim with his ukulele. Tiny Tim is so, so cute, so handsome. We love when he plays Tiptoe Through the Tulips, don't we, Chico? Don't we think Tiny Tim is just so handsome too? Nuzzle, nuzzle, nuzzle. She lifts her chin and gives us a stern look. If you're very good, I might let you watch a show with me sometime.
Thank you. Thank you. What would you say the biggest surprise was as you wrote this memoir? What was it?
I think for me, you worked on memory. I don't think I have the best memory, but I realized as I was writing that things that really emotionally resonate in our lives do leave deep memories. And those times in my life were so emotional that the memories were pretty intact. I'm not very good at remembering conversations. I often remember like a statement somebody made to me or a phrase they said. I can't recall verbatim conversations, and I don't actually include a lot of them. And this is one of the chapters in my book where I probably have more conversation than others, but I definitely remember how I felt. And that was pleasing to me. I think another thing that surprised me was how much humor came through as I was writing, because again, these were painful memories at the time, but by the time I was writing about it, they had all just faded into fuzzy, rosy, funny stories, a lot of them. And so that was a pleasant surprise too. I wasn't going through any kind of angst as I wrote. I was just kind of reliving it from the lens of, hey, I recovered and I'm doing fine, and aren't these great stories I can share? So those two things were welcome surprises.
I want to ask G. Claire, would you mind reading a little bit from the opening of your book, The Dreaming in a Time of Dragons?
Thank you. I would love to. And by the way, you can just call me Claire. Claire is good. It'll be easier, right? So yeah, Dreaming in a Time of Dragons. I think I'll just start reading from the prologue, which, okay. Queen Lenore's child was born that strange summer night. The north wind howled down from the mountains. Shrieking, it ripped through haystacks, lashed inlet waves, and pounded Dunmore Castle's ancient stone walls. An enormous creature rode the winds, his secret deep inside his ridged breast. Finding the turret above the lit castle window, he coiled his bulk around it and listened. Lenore trembled, still and pale under satin sheets. Isola, her new chambermaid, waited nearby, frowning and plucking at white cloths, now stained deep red. Likely won't see the light of day, she said under her breath. Lenore's eyelids fluttered. A boy? She whispered. You have a beautiful, healthy girl, Your Majesty. The queen raised herself on her pillows and lifted trembling arms to hold her baby. A girl, she gasped, pain knifing through her body. My life slips away, little one. Who will love you? Maddie laid her nurse's cloth over her shoulder and bent to draw the fretful child from Lenore's arms. You've lost much blood, Your Majesty. Please rest yourself. No, wait, the queen tightened her hold. Before I go, she brushed cracked lips against Evangeline's cheek and whispered in her ear. Even the wind hushed to listen. So when all was said that must be spoken and done that could be done, the queen lay silent and still in the ancient mahogany bed. Maddie lifted the wailing princess from Lenore's lifeless arms, prying tiny fingers from her mother's gown. Unseen by any but her child, Lenore's spirit shook loose from her body and paused above the nurse holding Evangeline. Bending, she kissed her daughter's cheek once more, then caught the hand of the waiting angel. Turning her face upward, she was gone in a twinkling. You've come in on an ill wind and no mistake, Maddie spoke softly to the crying princess, who will love you indeed. Candlelight glistened both their tears. The old nurse rocked the child gently in her soft, ample bosom, crooning the queen's song over her. Isola pulled the embroidered sheet over Lenore's face, glanced around the room, and slipped into the dark hallway. She stumbled, and a small empty vial fell out of its hiding place in her sleeve and clinked on the stone floor. Two chambermaids stepped into the hallway behind her. Isola grimaced and left it where it lay. Scurrying around the corner to the outer courtyard, she disappeared without a trace. An immense, unnatural shadow slithered from the turret ledge. It soared northward over sleeping villages, fleeing a faint thread of light behind the eastern mountains. King Cedric paced in the adjoining room, unaware, awaiting news of his son's birth. Edwin, a name fit to rule after all these years, a son, he muttered to himself in the dim candlelight. Dawn stretched rosy fingers across the inlet, pinking gray castle walls. The midwife tiptoed in, trembling, and dropped into a tight curtsy. My king, she murmured. Cedric turned to see the blood-spattered woman waiting in the doorway. His jaw tightened. Well, speak up, woman. The midwife stammered out her news. The king listened, waved her off, and stared out the window to the mountains of Dunmore, his mountains. Being a practical man, he would name the daughter for Edwin, the expected son. Of course, honor Lenore's last wish with the child's middle name. Edwina Evangeline she would be. He owed his queen that much. His vision blurred. Maddie slipped through the door. Begging your pardon, Your Majesty, would you like to hold your new daughter? She whispered. Daughter, oh, yes, later. Thus the dark days began. They said she was strange, like the wind she was born into. No amount of training, straightening, or fluffing seemed to make much difference. The young princess would sneeze and laugh entirely too loudly, burst into tears for no particular reason, and run off at odd times, her tiny shoes clattering down the stone hallways of Dunmore Castle. Even with her hair properly braided and her waist cinched tight under satin and silk, something about her always seemed caged, and barely tamed at that. Years passed, and Edwina Evangeline learned how to manage herself mostly. She kept her sad things buried in small boxes, so very deep inside, her terrible questions almost never leaked through the cracks. Eva accepted her life. She stopped hiding and tried to find small comfort in her daily routines until one day she just couldn't. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit about your backstory and how that played into your writing this book?
Yeah, well, just to step back a few years, about 9 years ago, I was an artist and an art teacher, and I would have girls come to my room. I taught middle and high school girls, and we would just talk about, you name it, we talk about it. And I fell in love with that age of girls, middle and high school girls. And this story, the seed of the story began to form. And I was kind of like, yeah, that would be cool. I didn't have the whole story yet, but I felt like it needed to be a story that had things in it like pain and compassion, forgiveness and redemption, even desolation and hope. And so as I just kind of moved on in my teaching, things you know how life is. Life goes on, things happened. I retired from teaching to do some things, and one of those things was look after my mother. We moved her up here to Georgia, and she was with us for about 1.5 years. And then right after she turned 100, she did pass away without being sick. Her heart just stopped beating. But anyway, during that time, I also found my birth mother, my biological mother, and got to know her, and shared with her that I was thinking about writing a book. And she told me that she had written some poetry, and she actually kept it hidden away in a shoebox. And so she had had a very difficult life, a lot of shame, a lot of pain, a lot of shame. And she just was pretty much shut down. So anyway, so the story began to be fully formed at this particular time. It was like blossoming inside of me. And I had trouble with that because I love the story, but I'm like, I'm an artist, not a writer. I need to find somebody who's going to write this story. But there was a voice inside that just said, you're the one, you need to write it. So after much convincing, I will have to say, by God, he even sent strangers to me, to tell me things about it. And so I finally gave myself over to the process. And once I said yes and did that, then it was kind of amazing to me. I didn't even know this was possible for me, but I would see scenes fully formed. Like I would sit down to write and these scenes would just like play out in front of me. And so I just like put my hands on the keyboard and just type out these scenes, including, conversations and everything. Plus, I began dreaming the scenes. And so I would keep a spiral notebook beside my bed. So when I woke up, I could get the scene down before it began to evaporate. And as they do. Have you done that too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, it has been just pretty much to me an amazing journey, this whole book. And, when I read back over it, I see parts of myself in it. Even though we're given a story, and it's kind of like that thing that you probably heard, the tipping point for things, which, could be stories, songs, inventions, cures, you name it. They're dropped in, waiting for someone who says, yes, I will bring that into the world. And so I did. I finally said yes, and then had the amazing adventure of my life, really. And then I got to meet Echo, and we met at a party, and Kevin, and just began talking about the process of getting it edited and published and whatnot. And you're thinking about the Lucid House was kind of in its infancy when I first started talking to you. But anyway, so now here we are, and we're on the final edit, and gonna be released this spring. Although there is well, let me go back. Is it okay if I just go back to this one part? I felt very strongly that I wanted to get the book published in some form, in a good form, the best I could do, and into the hands of my birth mother, Laura, before she died, because she was in a state of much decline in her health. And so last August, I was able to publish it and send her a copy when she was in just dire physical state in the hospital. Just everything you could think of was wrong with her. And my half sister that I got to know had called me and said, Mom, she could go any minute. She is that's the way it is. And I couldn't go down there and be with her because of COVID. So I was just like, what am I going to do? And so the book came up, it was published. So I got it down there as quick as possible. Lynn, my half sister, brought it to her in the hospital. And it seemed to have a healing and restorative and redemptive effect on her life, because within the next day or two, she was to go home. She was, she had a huge turnaround. And I'd love to think that having a book from me, had some part to play in that. So anyway, that was a huge blessing. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. And I just feel like also, we all have heard about generational curses, but I think generational blessings are even more powerful. And so that's, yeah.
All right, we're going to need to move on to Tamra. Can you tell us a little bit about your book? I love this concept, and it's just so important. I think, especially in the times we are in, we're all learning how important it is with family memories. So, can you talk to us about that?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's been really amazing to hear all these stories. And, that's what our theme is this year. It's all about the story. And it's kind of serendipitous that this book has been kind of brewing in the back of my mind for the last year or so. And I started writing it in January, right after Girlfriend Weekend. And I had no idea that it would be such I don't dovetail, I guess you'd say, into what's happening right now and how important it is. And I was amazed at the response that I've gotten so far from people that just, they don't really, early on, they didn't know what to do with their time. I mean, everybody was kind of like in shock because it was like everything just stopped. And so more people had time to think about family connections, really important stuff, not just the fluff stuff, but the really important stuff. And so I think that the good Lord gave this book to me for this time, to not only be an encouragement for other people, but to help people realize that everybody's story is important. And if it's okay, I'm just going to read a little short excerpt from the book, and it kind of highlights, I think, the theme of the book. And it's not it's not a complete tome. It's more like a guide and an encouragement. It's not about genealogy really, but it's about those memories and those things that we let slip through the cracks sometimes. And what prompted this was the writing of my own dad's story through the Great Depression and his experiences in World War II. And Kathy picked that book last year as a bonus book in June, and it was called A Blessed Life, One World War II CB Story. And it was all about my dad and our family. And this kind of was a springboard for the Art of Story Keeping, which is the book that Kathy, thank you, Kathy, brought to Lucid House and to you for publishing. And it just came out in December. So going back to what my dad experienced and him telling me the stories, and so what he remembered and shared were everyday, seemingly unimportant events, but with the benefit of hindsight, they're a treasure. His descriptions of places, peoples, and objects from a specific area in our nation's history gives us a glimpse into the past no history book can match. Every person has a lifetime of images, memories of smells and sounds, conversations, and scenes that are unique to them. There are no insignificant people. Every person has a story. This makes them a valuable part of our cultural fabric, even if they feel they have nothing to contribute. When we're in the middle of living our stories, we have no idea what will be the important things in the future. My mother kept journals for over 60 years, and her descriptions of the day JFK was shot, the landing on the moon, and other momentous events in our nation's history become more real and accessible when read in the context of our everyday life rather than just facts in a book. And you wonder, people think, why should I write down these things that happen to me every day? But is it worth it? Oh, yes, it's worth it. Many educators, researchers, and early childhood specialists, they think so. Study after study has proven the value of storytelling and passing along family history. Future reading skills, comprehension abilities, and attention spans are all improved when children are encouraged to share stories and listen to storytelling. Even children as young as 5 years old are capable of remembering and sharing stories. Stories are magical and create a sense of wonder, especially in the earlier grades. The act of storytelling helps kids develop an appreciation and understanding of other cultures, different countries, and religions. Stories introduce new vocabulary, stretch memory muscles, and teach sequencing and pacing. Now, I love the Albert Einstein quote. It says, if you want your children to be smart, tell them stories. If you want them to be brilliant, tell them more stories.
Mhm.
So that's what I want to encourage. I want to encourage everyone to gather those family stories any way you can. Record them on your phones. Call them on the old phone in your house, you know, if you still have one, if you have to. But this has brought a new challenge to gathering those stories with the, you know, being separated and not being able to meet in person. But you can still do it. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way, is the way I look at it. And it's important that we do these things.
You're so right. Thank you so much, Tamra. I want to move to Kevin and
Oh, you're
they are split here. So Connor's coming to us from Beirut, Lebanon, and Kevin's right here to my right. Could you share a little bit about the backstory of why y'all wrote this book?
What we were doing?
Yeah.
My background as a writer. Well, first of all, thank you for having us here tonight. So honored to be a part of the Pulpwood Queens and Tamra guys. And what a thrill to have a moment to talk about our book. We wrote Spellbound Under the Spanish Moss, A Southern Tale of Magic. Connor and I wrote and published that this year. And it was a dream come true. This is our first novel together. Connor's got another novel out, a couple of books of poetry. This is not my beginning as a writer. I actually began as a writer 25 years ago in New York. And I'm a big believer in pushing in and saying yes or asking until I get a yes. But years ago, I met an editor from a magazine. She was a travel editor at a cocktail party and got to talking to her about her job. And by the end of the night, and certainly by Monday morning, I had my first assignment as a travel writer, and I stumbled my way through it and fumbled my way for about 20 more years doing that, and became a Caribbean specialist, writing for magazines like Coastal Living, Caribbean Travel and Life, and a lot of honeymoon stories for Condé Nast Bride magazine. But during that time and that journey, I had a couple of different starts and stops on Southern novels, and got caught in writer's block, was very critical of my own writing, and over, each time just shelved it. And got the opportunity last year when Connor went over to Lebanon. We were using WhatsApp and we were using Google Docs. And we got into a rhythm where we wrote this thing the way songwriters write. We had an appointment to write every morning and a responsibility to show up each day with something new that we could add to our story. And that's how we got to the end of that. But I think, if I was going to say one other thing here, I'd say, like, in 2004, I was involved in an automobile accident. I was the last car pulling into a construction zone on the interstate, and I was going 10 miles an hour, and a fully loaded SUV pulling a very large trailer topped the hill behind me going 75 miles an hour and never hit the brakes. And it was, my car was knocked 50 yards down the road. I was the only person involved in the accident that walked out without a scratch. And if you ever saw the film Unbreakable with Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson, I seemingly walked out of that like Bruce Willis without a scratch on my body. But what I did come out of it was with a traumatic brain injury. And we didn't fully understand the extent of how bad that was. And, for a long time, maybe it wasn't even diagnosed for 3 months. I was still able to work as a photographer, but my ability to write and even my ability to read was severely impaired. And it took years for that to come back. So just to be able to sit here tonight and share and talk and hold up a book that Connor and I wrote together, which I can write again now. I really can. And kind of remember a lot more now too. But anyway, I think that's just a piece of the story that I haven't talked a lot about. Sorry to monopolize your time there, Connor, please.
No, that's not monopolizing at all. And I'm actually glad that he's, guys, the truth is that he never really talks about that part of life. And so that's, that actually really surprised me. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think it's important for people to see kind of lows as well as highs, because I'm sure that there's probably someone on this call that's also been in a car wreck or something that's definitely affected their mind, and I think this book has also been very important for us in terms of kind of our relationship as a father and son, and also as a family coming full circle, because obviously if you guys know, if you've ever lived with someone or been around someone with a traumatic brain injury, it can be kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation, where sometimes the person that you love and sometimes you're talking to something else. And so I think we couldn't have written this book if it hadn't been, a fully healed version of my dad there. So, I think that's something that means a lot to me. I'm still shocked he brought that up, because he a lot of times can kind of want to keep that to himself. But I think, I'm glad that you talked about that, Dad. There's actually 3 books. So I don't know if that, maybe I'm veering off here, but I think, the first book obviously is something that we're very proud of and very excited about, but we have a second book that we've written, finished. We're in the middle of editing. That's a part of this, and it's a trilogy actually. So we're working on the third book and have some of that finished. But I guess I'll throw it back to you guys. I'm sure there's probably a next question here.
Well, when you think about the themes that are in this book, what would you say are some of the most important themes for your characters? And can you tell people a little bit about where the story is located, a little bit about the time?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think one of the themes is we approached our characters from a very non-judgmental place. Because I think that if you write your characters judgmentally, then you can sort of introduce prejudices onto your characters as well. So you can kind of decide that this one is good and decide that this one is bad instead of writing them with empathy. I feel like that was enormously important, because a character like Wally, at different points, he kind of talks about how he, fakes his own death, and he's kind of a bit of a con artist, but he also has a lot of redemptive qualities, and he's a pretty humorous character. And I think you could say the same thing with Raven as you read the story and some of her motivations, and the same thing could be said for Evangeline. So I think, treating them like real people where they're textured, because nobody's obviously entirely good or entirely bad. I think we could both agree that, one person's angel has been, another person's demon before in their lives, and everything kind of comes a bit full circle here. So I feel like that was enormously important as we were writing our characters.
Thank you. I think we need to move to Andrea, Faye, Christian. She's coming. Andrea, can you tell us where you're coming from tonight to join us?
Yes, I can. First of all, hello everybody, and it's really nice to meet you all, albeit virtually. I'm actually coming from Malta, which is an island off the north of Africa and the south of Italy, and it's 2 a.m. in the morning, or quarter past 2. So I'm way past my bedtime, but anyway, that's why I look a bit disheveled. And so that's where I'm coming from on a stormy night as well. So. What would you like to ask me?
So when Kathy first read your book, she said the name is Suspension, and it's time travel. It's all kinds of, it's just got all these layers. And Kathy, as you know, reads hundreds of books in a year. And she said that your story was unlike any she's ever read, ever. And so that's why your book is one of our international picks this year, or one of her international picks. So could you just tell us a little bit about your story, your process, where this came from?
Wow, yeah, I can try. Okay, my background is I'm actually from Swansea, I'm Welsh, and I'm a radio presenter for 20 years in the UK. I've been a freelance writer for 26 years. I write for a lot of magazines and newspapers. And this is my first novel. And I can't understand why it took me so long to finish it, but it did. Because I've started many books, like many of you. I mean, I grew up, it's something within me. Writing is like breathing. As a child, my parents would be called down to school, but they'd be given homework to the children. Most kids would put in like half a page. At 6 years old, I was writing pages and pages and pages and stories, you know, and pictures. And so it's something that's always been within me. I'm sure you're identifying with that, yeah? And I sort of fell into radio, and then I fell into writing, because even though I loved it, and under the bed in my parents' house, today there are still realms of paper and boxes of paper, stories that I was writing. To write a book is a different stamina. It's a different discipline. And I've written a lot of human interest stories, I think, over the years, a lot of motoring articles, believe it or not, interior design. And it sort of made me hone my art, if you like. I've got no formal training. I just knew from school that something has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so I always had this structure when I would write anything. The difference with Suspension was that this story, I saw it. I've half written about 4 or 5 novels, and they're sitting there on my computers in boxes, whatever. But Suspension, I saw it from the beginning, and I saw it right through to the end. And the story behind it is that basically, because I worked in radio, I have a lot of contacts with the BBC, the British Broadcasting Society. I used to, corporation, I used to write for them, occasionally script writing. I've got friends that work in the film industry. And I was watching at the time a lot of these BBC miniseries, you know, the 6-part series, which are done from the film studios, which are located throughout the UK. And there's one in Cardiff and in another town called Bristol. And I was watching these 6-part miniseries and thinking, you know, the storylines were really weak, and I could write better. And I had contacts, and I was thinking maybe I can knock together a script or something. So that was the actual original idea of Suspension, that it would be a 6-part miniseries. But then I realized that I didn't really know how to write a script. So I didn't have a clue, you know. It was a completely new discipline that I'd never sort of tried to go down that route. So I decided to write it as a book. Now, at the time I was working as, like I said, a freelance writer. I was quite disciplined, and every day I'd start work at 9 and I'd finish about 12:30. And that was my working day, because my brain, probably like yours, is like a battery, and it drains out. And so I would have this like working 3-4 hours a day disciplined. And I started writing Suspension, and it was really coming together. And then I predicted I would write it in about 6 months. And I really saw the story, and I felt really strongly about it. And it's located around the Clifton Suspension Bridge, which is obviously why the name Suspension came along. That wasn't that even the name itself even has a story, and that was near the film studios. But basically, life took me on a different route, and I moved to Sicily, and then Suspension got put in a box and forgot about for a number of years. And then early last year, I was recovering from major surgery. I got diagnosed with cancer, and I had to have 3 or 4 months of basic, you know, recovery, a lot of bed rest. And so I went through like a major depression, and I decided that I really needed to do something in this time that I was just sitting around doing nothing in my mind, in my head too much. So I got out the first 35,000 words of this book, and I read it again, and I thought, well, actually, it's quite good. I need to sit and finish it. And so I did. So that's basically how it came to be finished after 4 years of sitting in a file on the computer in reality. And it is a story, I think, yeah, unlike anything that I've looked for something similar. I looked at Alice Sebold's Lovely Bones, sorry, that's a book which sort of resonates a little bit. And there's a film by Anthony Minghella, Truly, Madly, Deeply, which you may have seen, about ghosts. That sort of, there were ideas that sort of resonated in that but my story is unlike anything that's true. It's the bridge is a portal, and it was built by a guy, a great British civil engineer called Isambard Brunel. That's the name, not to pronounce correctly. And this guy was basically like a rock star in his era. You know, he was an amazing man. He built so many great structures in the United Kingdom, and he died before it was finished. So he is basically the gatekeeper of this portal. And the protagonist of the story is basically, well, in part, it's partly me, because it's about a broken-hearted woman who's basically sitting alone in her flat one day, as I was in Malta when this idea came to me, and she falls asleep. And basically she dies. She has a congenital heart defect and she dies. And she doesn't realize at first that she's dead. But she has a dream, first of all, that she's has a job to do. And this dream actually is her reality, that she's dead. And she's what's called a dream walker. And this is somebody that's predestined to sort of help people finish their story so they can pass into whatever their heaven, their virtue, their version of whatever their heaven is. And I remember sitting in my flat in Malta where I was living at the time and feeling sorry for myself and thinking, I could die here and nobody would even know. I'd find me a rotting corpse in a few days' time. And that's where this story came from. And then I took it back to this suspension bridge, which had been something that I always saw when I flew into the UK. This great structure. When I used to come back from the airport down to my parents' place, I would see this suspension bridge and just marvel at it. And so this idea came together. So that's basically how suspension came about. And as I said, it's pretty fast-paced. It's the typical protagonist. She's broken-hearted. She's got a husband has left her. She doesn't understand what her purpose is. She's a reluctant heroine. And she meets many characters along the way, including Ernest Hemingway, Einstein, and people like that. And so I hope I've answered that question as best I can anyway.
It's fantastic. I'm so glad that a mutual friend introduced us and that we read
Marcia.
And
Marcia, wonderful lady. Yeah, I'm seeing her next week actually.
Oh, good, good. Well, we need to move on to Doug. Doug, I don't see you.
I'm here.
Okay. Doug.
Long time no see.
So Doug, can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yes. Yeah. I've been in sales, insurance sales for 45 years, and started out in Texas, going down the street, door to door, the hardest way you can make a living, knocking on doors and trying to sell something that no one had a thought that they needed before you walked in the door. And I never envisioned doing it. I grew up in Texas and Montana in the ranches and the oil field business. But I just knew after 20 something years or as a 20 something year old that I didn't want to do that for a career. Especially, Kevin in Montana in December. I didn't want to be a rancher in the oil field. He just came from there. So anyway, I accidentally stumbled into the insurance business. And what I found in the insurance business is, and let me back up a little bit how we got in the book, is Echo and Connor and Echo's mother were out here at the last Girlfriend's Weekend in Jefferson, Texas. And they stayed at our B&B and I met them, and Echo and I got talking about writing a book, and she agreed to help me write this book. And so basically talked me into it, twisted my arm, which is still trying to heal. But but I'm so glad she did. I had a blast. I hear all of you guys that had a book within you for years, and finally something happened to make you do it. And I understand all that now. But I had never heard of anybody that ever dreamed of being a salesman, that, ever went to their counselor and said, this is what I want to be. And so you get into sales either accidentally, you get recruited into it, you inherit into it, or, but you don't dream into it. And so when I stumbled into it, I didn't know what to expect. And so what I ended up finding out is everybody's in sales. I don't care what it is you do. I don't care what it is, what career you have. You could be counseling a child. You could be, selling any one of your services, selling a book, selling an idea, convincing someone, telling a joke. You're in sales. And so once there was a negative connotation years ago about, the fast talking salesman or the hard closing salesman. And I wanted to change that. So I decided to make sales a fun career. I've had a blast with it. I've hired and taught agents for years, for 45 years, and we make sure we have fun with it. I mean, there's enough negativism. You guys have all grown up in the negative world of people turning you down, saying no, 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 and you just keep plugging away. And that's what sales is. But what people didn't see is what we go through in a career in sales. You only see us sitting at your table or talking to you. So Echo and I put together a book that it's called a ride along. It's what a veteran agent goes out with a brand new agent and teaches them the ropes and gets to show them how to do it. And that's what the book is a ride along with me in the field, showing you what we did, how we do it, how we fail, how do you handle failure, how you succeed, how you handle that. And it's called a fun ride. And so there's a lot of hilarious stories that we share in the book. And so I really thank Echo for talking me into it.
Thank you so much, Doug. I think now we are just about out of time. We have about 4 minutes left. Are there any questions out there?
I got one thing real quick. There's not a question. Is you and I talked about it. It ties in with some of the conversations I've heard here from the ladies. And this is one of the stories in the book. It's just real quickly, just take a second. And I had an appointment in Miles City, Montana, and I made the 3-hour drive to see a woman by the name of Alice. I had never met her before, but she's a referral from another client. And when I arrived at her home, no one came to the door. But I heard her, a female voice yelling out, "Let yourself in, I'm back here." Now, this particular chapter is titled How a Grapevine Can Produce Some Really Sweet Results if you work with that grapevine. So the door was unlocked. And so I did what I was told. I just went on in. I didn't see anybody, but she called out again, "I'm in the bathroom. I need help." So to my shock, I found that my prospect had fallen in the bathtub, and due to her girth and her age, she couldn't get up. So she said, "Can you help me, Doug?" I said, "I've been here for 3 hours and I've been praying you'd get here soon." So I grabbed a towel, covered her up, and then hoisted her up to her feet and out of the tub. All the time she's saying, "You're my hero, Doug." Well, didn't know about that, but I was beat red. But after I got Alice standing upright, we did a quick check to make sure nothing was broken. And after confirming that she was okay, Alice told me to go wait in the kitchen while she got dressed. And she never mentioned it again, at least not to me. She bought a policy that day, become a great policy holder, and she gave me the names of several of her friends who she thought might also be interested in this little town. Every time I called on them, they'd invariably ask, "Well, tell me, Doug, how did you meet Alice?" And I'd give them some generic answer, and I'd hear giggles and laughter on the phone or face-to-face when we met. And I soon discovered that Alice had explained to all of her friends how Doug and her had met and how I rescued her in great detail. Well, long story short, I wrote almost every lady in this town. I never had so many sales in a short period of time, and it was just due to this network of this grateful lady. So this book talks about, paying it forward, doing what you can to help others, and it'll all come back to you.
And I think that's what this weekend's been all about, is helping each other as writers, encouraging each other with our stories. And I'm just so grateful I know we've got a really diverse group here, but that's part of what we're all about here at Lucid House, is we just want fantastic stories in all different genres. And every one of these people here, we absolutely love, and we're really proud of y'all. I think we have to get off and go to our next segment in just a minute. I do want to mention one of our authors was supposed to be here. His name is Joseph Marshall III, and he is a Lakota Sioux author, very well established author. And the last we've heard from him, he was supposed to be here. We have his book. It's a book that we'll be releasing in the fall. And he felt called to go back up to North Dakota to be with his people. And Kathy and I have not been able to reach him since. So we'd really appreciate prayers for him. So thank you.
Echo, I think the next step is Vince and Mickey, and both of them are on this call. We don't have to leave. Yeah.
You know what? Then let's just turn over. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate y'all being here. And why don't we bring Mickey and Vince up, and we'll just.
Do we want to stay on Echo? Do we want to just stay on this Zoom meeting?
Yeah, let's just
go here.
Yeah, that's the way it's scheduled, is for us to stay on this one.
Okay.
Huh?
Scheduled that way for us to stay on this one.
Okay.
So, all right. So can you bring them up, Doug? Thank you.
Hi.
Hey, there's Mickey.
There's
Hi.
Vince.
Vince
I'm
is
here.
still down below. We're going to move you up. Hang on just a second.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yes. Yay.
There we are. We're side by side, Mickey.
Good deal. Okay, Echo.
Okay. All right. So is there any way to have just Vince and Mickey up so that we can see them better?
Sure you want that?
Okay.
Where is he?
Okay. So
There we go.
There he is.
So this is, I want to introduce you to a couple of people who are have become really dear friends. This is Vince Spinnato, and his book is called My Pursuit of Beauty. He is a cosmetic chemist, and he has done products for all kinds of stars. He's led just the most incredible, hilarious life. And this is his co-author, Mickey Goodman, his ghostwriter. And Mickey is one of my dearest friends. She lives right here in Atlanta, near me. And so let's just get going. Vince, will you tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book?
Yes, sure. It was for lethargic reasons. I was a person on a therapy couch my whole entire life since I was about 11, 12 years old, for lots of reasons, which we'll unpack a little bit during this session here. But pretty much after about 30 years being with a therapist, I literally had one day on the couch, same hour meeting I've always had 30 years in. And about 20 minutes into the meeting, I just said, I can't hear myself talk anymore. I'm like, I'm done. I think I can't unpack this stuff anymore. It's been 30 years. I've had it. And I left that day, and literally that evening, I started talking into recorder and telling my story from 6, 7 years old all the way up to, Mickey wrapping up with me about 6 months ago. So it's been about 45 years. Well, not that long, 40 years of my journey. But it really was to try and just get everything out rather than keep just talking it and rehashing it over and over and over again. So now that I wrote it out, Mickey wrote it out. Now that I talked it out, it's behind me, I hope.
So I guess what you're kind of saying is writing became therapy. Right, the process of writing the book became therapy.
Yeah, and for me, as you and Cassie know and Mickey know very well, I have a tremendous amount of learning disabilities. So ADD, HDD, OPP, ESPN, PMS. I mean, everything you can think of. So for me, I didn't physically write anything, but telling the story, absolutely. So I unpacked my story to a colleague of mine for about 5 years, and then I turned everything over to Mickey about 5 years ago, and she is the one to put pen to paper and gets credit for all the physical work as far as I'm concerned.
So, and a lot of people don't really understand how a ghostwriter relationship works. So how did you and Mickey connect? Because you're out in Hollywood, essentially, right?
I'm in Hollywood, but my business manager and my original publicist and still publicist, I guess to this day, she still kind of helps me out. Marilyn Davis, also in Atlanta by UEcho, and she had a connection with my publisher in Atlanta also, who worked with Mickey. So that's where the connection came from. So they actually teamed me and Mickey up together, and we were a perfect match from the first half an hour. And I warned her. I said, this is going to be this is going to be an unpacking. So if you're prepared for it, let's do it.
And what's it been like to work with Vince, Mickey?
It has been the most hilarious experience of my life. I've written, ghosted about 6 other books, and I can say unequivocally that working with Vince was the most fun of all. It worked out really well, even though he's in LA or in California and I'm in Atlanta. We would talk on the phone and I would record the conversations and then write them up, and then we would get back together and kind of read it together. And there was a huge editing process, but it was just super fun, super, super fun.
Pretty much all my misfortune was a delight for Mickey. So we're about 175 years apart, but it was a perfect combination, right, Mickey? I like to bust her balls because she's 107 and I'm like 46.
Thanks, Vince.
Because she uses your skincare, right?
That's right, because it's called. She's like I call her Mrs. Button. She ages in reverse.
I wish. I wish.
So could you tell us a little bit about what got you interested in being a cosmetic chemist in the first place?
Yeah, it's kind of a bizarre, little embarrassing story, but I love to tell it. I like for it to be some kind of like really lethargic, learning experience. But it was sitting with my grandmother after school watching The Young and the Restless for 6 years growing up as a kid. And if the show, is still on TV, but any of you guys that know the show, it's about a cosmetic company called Jabot, which is a perfuming and cosmetic company. So that literally is what planted the idea. Like, it's such an embarrassing way to get your first spark, but that's honestly where it came from. And at 10 years old, I already was creating like my first fragrance in my sister's Easy Bake Oven that I did wrong. I still have a burn on my hand to prove it from 40 years ago that I did it. So that was the first idea. And then unfortunately, like in 1981, which I was born in 74. So I was only 7. And 1981, Dynasty came out with Aaron Spelling's Dynasty. And that really threw a wrench in the thing because that showed all the money and the glamour. So I kind of combined it, Young and the Restless and Dynasty, and that's where I started getting my ideas from, to have a beauty company like Young and Restless, but be able to sit on a balcony and throw a martini in somebody's face and say, "Why would you do that?" and just smack them down the steps. So that was a good combination.
You gotta read it. You gotta read this book.
I wish it was on.
Please do. Please do.
I wish I could have said I had a spiritual moment like at 7 years old and I levitated and thought of it, but it was actually CBS.
So you went through a lot as a kid though. Can you tell us about what happened? I know you were very close to your grandmother.
Right.
And there was a moment in your life that was really kind of changed everything. So,
right. I can still to this day, again, so far at 46, and maybe I'm sure all you have these experiences too, but I have 3 like unequivocal light switch moments where my personality, my body, my energy, my spiritual self, whatever you want to call it, changed overnight. And one of them when I was 11, and this is not a happy story, but it's part of the whole journey here. Again, I was very close to my grandmother, and when I was with her alone, unfortunately, when she had a heart attack and she passed away. But the changing moment for me was that I was there by myself and as a kid, and I was trying so hard to resuscitate her that I crushed her rib cage. And again, I didn't know it happened at the time. So about 2-3 hours later, when she was in the hospital, I was like, wasn't allowed in the ER and that kind of stuff because I was too young. But I did my peeking around the corner, and I heard the doctor tell my parents, your son, did what he could do, but he actually crushed her rib cage, and that's actually what killed her. So that was something at 11 years old that I heard, and my parents never brought it up ever in my lifetime, and they didn't even know. They passed away about 10 years ago, and it never even came up. But that's something that stuck with me. And then the following week, I started doing a disorder called trichotillomania, which is a compulsive hair pulling disorder. It affects about 99% women. I'm one of the lucky 1% of the guys that have it, but it's always triggered by a traumatic event. And I know that for sure is what did it, because I remember sitting down one day about a week after my grandmother passed away. I know exactly what I was doing. I was watching Revenge of the Nerds, the movie, part 1. And when the movie started, I was doing what I was doing. And 2 hours later, when it was over, I had a pile of hair on the floor, probably the size of a coaster. So I didn't know I was doing it. It was, it was compulsive. I didn't know what had happened. So, and that disorder, even the disorder right now is kind of a hidden disorder. A lot of people don't talk about it because it's very, it's very kind of an embarrassing disorder for people. But I've been out there for 30 years, talking about it. But that was the first thing to that's what brought me to the therapy's couch, was when that started off. And then I have, many years later, I went to a place in Napa Valley called the Hoffman Institute, which is like a spiritual retreat, like a 2-week, in the mountains, going through intensive therapy, working with like 24 to 30 other people. And once again, I left that event, and I was about 33 years old at the time. And I left a lot of that behind there. And then flash forward to the book, that was again, it's a really long story, but I'll just say really briefly, I'm a massive World War II history buff. I've been studying it since I was a kid. I minored in Holocaust studies in college. I'm personally Roman Catholic, so I'm not Jewish, but that wasn't even really the interest, not from the religion side, but just I had an interest in the war in general, so I can take anybody through the German side, the Italian side, the Russian side, the American side, the British side. So I'm really educated. And long story short, I was able to sneak my way on the Auschwitz, in Poland and Krakow about a year and a half ago, which is very recently. And I spent the night on the camp. I had the proper pajamas. So I really tried to, and it's a very hard story to tell because it can almost kind of border in a disrespectful way when you're telling a story, like, why would I want to be in Auschwitz overnight in this camp? But I was really wanting to try and experience, just what had happened. And I woke up a different person. And back to Mickey, this only happened about a year and a half ago. This is very recent. And me and Mickey were pretty much done the book. And I begged her and begged my publisher, please let me get this chapter into the book about what happened in Auschwitz. And it's pretty much our last chapter of the book. And we squeezed it in at the very end because it was life-changing. So it was really those 3 kind of events that kept me, on the path that I was on. It kept changing me.
Wow, that's a lot.
I like talk for some unpacking.
So when I can only imagine that when the trick, which I know is what it's short for, started, that you experienced a lot of bullying.
Sure. Yeah, and mainly because no one knew what it was. I mean, it was very patchy and very evident. It was all over my head, and it's all over the body too. It's hair, your hair on your head, it's armpit hair, it's pubic hair, it's leg hair. So it's a really it's really a genetic dysmorphic disorder. It's kind of the experts compare it mostly closely to cutting. I thank God I never did anything like that, but this is in the same kind of family as like cutting, biting your nails, picking your nails, the hair pulling. So there's a lethargic release of doing it, and it never goes away. I still do it even as of this day, but I learned how to control it, and I haven't pulled the hair on my head probably for about 6-7 years, but I'll still do leg hair once in a while, or pubic hair once in a while, or armpit hair once in a while. And it's just like and I have a lot of tools now that I learned to do that try and help me through it. That's why I had this foundation now called Trick Stars, which is to try and help women and men that actually have the disorder and kind of let them know the things that I've learned that actually help you kind of minimize it.
So what happened that propelled you from New Jersey, where you grew up, all the way out to Hollywood when you were?
I literally like ran for my life. I had a fabulous family. I was very supportive. I came out gay, 18 years old. I didn't know until I actually was the president of my senior year of high school, and I gave the valedictorian speech. And that night on the stage, I don't think even Kathy or Mickey, none of you guys even noticed. That night on the stage, I told my whole speech, and I go, and by the way, I'm gay. And I like said it out to the whole entire graduation crowd, to the family, whatever. And so for some reason I had to wait till like graduation night. And then that night, all my friends went to all the graduation parties, and I went to my first gay bar. And I grew up on the Jersey Shore on Ocean City, like right on the boardwalks. It's a beautiful, fun area. So we had Atlantic City about 20 minutes north of us, which we called, the debacle area, so which is, gambling and prostitution and incitement, whatever you want to call it, debauchery. So I went to Atlantic City, and that was my first, night. And then I realized once I was there after 6 months that being gay in Southern New Jersey, at least in the very early 90s, there was no Will and Grace, there was no Ellen, there was nothing was out. So we had nothing to relate to. It was still kind of like, you weren't in the right spot. So I just got in the car and I drove, and I honestly got in the car and I told my parents, I'll call you where I'm going. I don't know if I was going to Atlanta or to Denver or to Chicago. I just got in the car and I drove, and I just stopped when I hit the ocean, which was Malibu. And I said, either I stop here or next stop is Tokyo. I had no other further to go. So I slept my first night on the beach in Malibu, and I just went there with no money in my pocket and just drove until I stopped and hit the ocean. That's how I ended up out here.
So how did you even begin to start to learn how to make products for people? Are we all frozen? The whole thing just froze. I'm not frozen, but everybody else is.
And drop off resumes. Now this is like, about 10 years before 9/11. So you still can go into buildings and present yourself and kind of like storm the castle and bring a resume and whatever. Now you try and go and you get shit. You would get shot with a poison tip bamboo dart before you made it through the door. So those days are over, obviously, but that's how I just started trying to do it. And I realized as I was doing it, like, why do I keep staying here? Again, with all these learning disabilities, I happened to go to a school that every single professor in the school, which is still the only one in the country to this day, that every single professor is a doctor. So if you had international relations, they were a doctor. If you had yoga and physical ed, they were a doctor in yoga. So it's that bizarre. So the reason why I'm mentioning that is that they were all absolutely brilliant. And I didn't know I was dyslexic until the first day of my college essay that I did. I went in, and this woman that's absolutely brilliant, she read the first sentence, she said, Vince, you're dyslexic. So I went through all of grammar school, all of high school, being like in the special classes. I couldn't spell and write. And thank God spell check came out when I started my career in the early 90s. Because I'm not even kidding you. If there wasn't spell check, you would think I had Down syndrome. Because I spell so bad that even the computers can't, what? I don't know what you're even trying to say. So sometimes I got to go and Google, how do you spell convenience? It's one of my hard words. I mean, I know, been trying to do it for 10 years. I still get it wrong. So thank God for spell check. You guys all think I might have borderline, have some kind of mental disorder. But so that's how I just got to it. And I just said, you know what? I don't want to do this. I don't really want to be here. And I just got in the car and I just drove to California. Now, but to answer your question, Echo, which I know is probably going to come next, is that I do have big balls, as far as you can tell, as far as chutzpah. So I got as far as Phoenix, and I found a Harper's Bazaar magazine, and there was a woman in there that was famous for a a thing called Kitchen Cosmetics, which is developing cosmetics for stuff you have in the kitchen, like a avocado mask or whatever. And she was very famous in Beverly Hills. And I called her from Phoenix and said, my name is Spinnato. I'm in Phoenix. I'm moving to California. I'm going to come work for you when I get there. And she's like thought I was a lunatic. She's like, okay. And she kind of hung up on me. So 3 days later, I showed up at her salon door. I said, this is Vince, by the way. And the other bizarre thing was I got there to California on the day of the OJ verdict result trial. So it was like a day that was kind of like in a twilight zone. And I didn't know what I said. Oh, I always heard about Los Angeles being so crazy and the traffic and like I got there and there was nobody on the streets. I don't know what was going on. And it was like, so I went into this woman's salon and she's there staring at you. We're all waiting for the OJ verdict to come in. And it's like, I'm going to start working with you tomorrow morning. And she's like, well, I could use some help, but I can't pay you. So I worked for her for free for a year and lived off her credit cards, which was not a good idea, as I'm sure you all know. But that was my very first start to getting an idea of how to start working in the beauty industry.
You got to read the book.
That's just like, that's like the first 4 paragraphs of chapter 2, basically.
That's right.
So, how on earth did you go from all that to snagging Michael Jordan as your first celebrity client?
Well, right across the street was a company. She was right off the corner of Rodeo Drive and Wilshire Boulevard, so a very famous area, obviously. And right across the street was Bijan, which is a very prestige, fragrance house. And once again, I just was working the street like I was trying to do in New York City. And I said, I'm working with this lady right down the road. And they all knew who she was. And I said, I'd like to try and dabble in perfumery work too. And once again, the guy said, well, if you want to come in like on a Saturday, we have a new project coming up for, a celebrity. He didn't tell me who it was at the time. It's right when his Air Jordans came out. So he's kind of was really, really hot at that point, just like 1995, 96. And at the same time, next door across the street was Chanel. And this is a funny story too. It's kind of 2 things happened at once. That was the month and period of time that Monica Lewinsky was going down on the president, which was delightful for all of us. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is that she went on a 2020 episode with Diane Sawyer to talk about it after President Clinton came clean, and she had a dark nail polish on, which is like a blood red color, and it ended up being Vamp from Chanel. So what happened was the very following day after this Monica Lewinsky thing aired on 60 Minutes with Diane Sawyer, there was a line down the street from Rodeo Drive of women that wanted to buy this Vamp nail polish. And they couldn't even keep, it was like a stampede of people that wanted this nail polish. So I also went across the street and said, can I work with you guys? And I'll help you give I used to call it the going down nail polish for obvious reasons. And that's how I just worked my way into these stores.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm sorry if Echo and Mickey didn't actually warn you of my personality, because probably a lot of you are very conservative, straight-laced, holy rollers, and I'm just going to throw it all out there.
Okay.
Gotta read this book.
Yeah.
So
Nobody will burst into flames while I'm talking, I promise.
yes. So can you talk about some of the celebrities that you've worked for?
Well, I started with Michael Jordan, and then that a couple months later rolled into Jennifer Lopez, which was my favorite client. She was really just kind of getting really popular at the time. So I worked on her second fragrance called Still, which is still on the market today. And then it really, at that point, it just kind of steamrolled into each other. Because what actually happened was when I got the Jennifer Lopez one, which of course was a massive name, and she was very, very nice to me. We got along really well. She had a very famous song there at that time called Jenny from the Block, and she was from the Bronx and I was from Jersey, so we kind of hit it off. So she started calling me Vinny from the Block and kind of talking about me. There was no Twitter or anything yet. So she started telling her friends, and then, coincidentally, then it went into Jessica Simpson and Lindsay Lohan and Carrie Underwood and Gwen Stefani, and really just kept growing and growing from there. So now what happened about 10 years ago, as I was kind of working for these celebrities on my own, I then became a resource for the agencies like William Morris and APA and Gerst and CAA. So all these big agencies that actually rep the celebrities, I'm now a resource for them. So if they have a celebrity that wants to do hair care, skin care, bath and body, a fine fragrance, etc., they normally will reach out to me as I'm one of their resources and say, okay, we have, I like recently this week, I just got an offer for Brooke Shields, and she's pretty much, I thought she was dead, but she's still alive. And this is very like post Blue Lagoon, you know, so like, I'm like, what are we doing now? Like, we're gonna like, I mean, you got poor Jamie Lee Curtis doing yogurt that she's shitting her pants, and you got, you know, Paul Abdul's got arthritis dancing down the thing now. I mean, I feel like I'm like, what happened? I mean, Cyndi Lauper's got leprosy. I mean, so all these celebrities now that we're seeing, it's like, what am I gonna do with Brooke Shields? Isn't she like, you know, in a box somewhere? Anyway, so we get these weird requests and where we come all over the place. I mean, I don't want to know Jamie Lee Curtis can't crap her pants. I mean, I don't need to know that. I mean, she's like an icon, right? It's like, I don't need to know that.
Oh my God.
So,
Oh, geez.
so Vinny, can you tell us a little bit about Caviar and Diamond? Just a little bit.
Yeah, so that's my new skincare line, which is called Caviar and Diamonds. And I developed this about 3 years ago, specifically for the market of Dubai. And that's why it's actually tied around diamonds. So I had a good resource connection out there that I was developing this for. And Dubai is one of the diamond capitals of the world. So we kind of built this program around their market. So it's a very, very high-end prestige product line. It retails like $1,500. And it's actually with real diamond syrup, which is diamond dust, and caviar extract. So it's laced with both those materials. Diamonds and gold and and silver PCA, they're very, very rich in earth minerals, copper PCA, zinc PCA, magnesium PCA, and our bodies are about 70% oceanic and about 30% earth metals. So that's where the caviar part and the collaboration came from. So we have the caviar extract part, which of course is what keeps fish alive before they are born. So it's very, very rich in amino acids and everything you can imagine that's great for the skin. So we did this combination together, and the people that have tried it so far is saying it's life changing. And being a cosmetic chemist, I've launched over 300 brands since 1995, and I haven't really actually done it for myself. So working on this brand, I had to be the best. So I've been working on it for 10 years. So every time I get done, I go, oh, new technology came out and I want to revamp it. New technology came out, I want to revamp it again. So finally I had to finish it and try it and get it done. And now it just launched a couple weeks ago. That's why I said, I mean, Mickey's 107, but look how she looks like she's 50. So she's been using it aging in reverse.
And she's a really good sport.
Listen, he gave one of these to the Pat Conroy silent auction. I'm bidding. I mean, you got
absolutely. Yeah. So, well, does anybody have any? We have about 3 minutes left before we need to go to our slumber party after party. So, anybody? What'd you say?
At the slumber party orgy and buffet.
Whatever.
Remotely. Yeah. So I'm looking for the chat. Or does can anybody tell me if there are any questions out there? Raise your hand.
They're stunned. Oh,
Kathleen.
This whole weekend has been healing. Vince, your humor, I love it. And everything you said. I'm a grandma with a little boy who's going to turn 8, who's got some issues. So I'm thinking right now, you're a success. And I love Mickey. You must have a great sense of humor and y'all work together. But thank you, because you give me hope. This whole weekend has filled me with hope because everything that's going on in our country. So thank you, sir.
Of course, and I'll make your son feel even better. It's I know he's probably too young to read the book, but if you want to read it to him out loud, I always tell everybody, get the book, read it, enjoy it, and literally do. I think my book actually should be called an antonym book. Do everything opposite that I did, and it'll be much more successful that way. So really, it's kind of a cautionary tale to how to be successful in 45 easy steps, but don't do it that way. So do the opposite of what you read, and he'll be all set.
You're awesome.
Well, thank you both so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
We really enjoy it. And we're excited that Lucid House is going to be publishing the audio version of Vinny's book. So,
and there's a documentary coming out too.
Oh, yes, that's true. It's awesome.
So we're excited.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. And everybody else, we need to log off and move to the Mix and Mingle Fun Extravaganza.
Thank you for putting
That's right. TGIF, everybody. We'll see you at the next link. Vince, you're a rock star.
Call me
So
every
are
five,
you, Nikki.
call me every 5 minutes.
Okay.
102-year-old rock star, right?
Yeah.
You look fabulous. You look gorgeous.
We all need it, don't we?
Good
All
night.
right. Night.
Bye-bye. Leave.